Hey guys, maybe next time here. So I'm just gonna really quickly talk about this Yorion deck, Bant Yorion. I went 5-0, 10-0 in a Magic Fest online qualifier last night. You guys can see the videos kind of coming after this, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the deck, how to sideboard with it, the theory behind it, and kind of where the standard metagame goes from here a little bit. So, anyways, this is 80 card Bant Yorion this week. I think this is the best deck in the format. The reason being that Fires of Invention decks are the best decks right now. So they're the most popular decks, followed probably by Wilderness Reclamation, and this deck just crushes all of that stuff. So the thing is, the Fires is a pretty free matchup for this deck. Of course, you can lose, things can go wrong, but Fires is incredibly favored. I played a version of this in two different Magic Fest Online qualifiers, and I'm a combined 7-1 in those events against Fires. So I've been doing really well against the Karuga Fires list that have been really popular. Beat a copy of Gabe Nassif's 4-color Esper Fires deck. So this deck is super strong against the Fires variants. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. Now, Elspeth Conquers Death is just one of the best cards against Fires. Say they get a Fires down, it can remove Fires. It removes every single permanent in their deck because the Karuga Fires list are only playing permanents that cost 3 or above. So the deck is super strong because a lot of the play patterns involve, you get to ramp on the early turns, and then, your opponent plays like a Fires of Invention. You're able to Elspeth Conquers Death it, and then, on the following turn, you get to play Yorion, and it always starts in your hand. So you Yorion the Elspeth Conquers Death, and then you get to remove, a second permanent, and you get to trigger not only the first part of Elspeth Conquers Death on the saga, but the second has already triggered as well. So it's super powerful. The deck really shines against control because, not only do we have, the Elspeth Conquers Death shell, but we also have, other ways to go to the top, like Agent of Treachery. It's actually a super common play pattern as well to steal an agent or to steal a Fires of Invention with Agent of Treachery, play Yorion for free with the Fires of Invention, bounce your Agent of Treachery, and then steal something else. So super common play patterns. Playing the Shark Typhoons also makes the aggressive, also makes the control matchups, even more favored. They can't really interact with this card. I actually have almost never played this card for the full 6. More often than not, say your opponent plays a Teferi or something, end of turn, you're cycling this, you're making a Shark, and you're able to beat down. Now, we have 4 Shadow the Skies. These are for the aggressive matchups. It's okay, but the thing is, this deck is really meant to beat the controlling decks and, kind of the greedy way this format has, been developing. The thing is, Fires, the way the metagame is developed, Croakies, hit rank 1 Legend or rank 1 Mythic the first week of the format with Red-Black Lurrus, which is a super aggressive deck. And, that same week, White-Black Lurrus won, the first big online Lotus Box tournament on Arena. So, we need to have Shadow the Skies as a concession to the Red-Black Lurrus decks, but the thing is, they're actually, not showing up a ton, and we actually see this weekend that as the format's gotten greedier, decks like Red-White Cycling have started to punish the super greedy decks. So, of course, you need this for aggressive matchups, but if the format begins to shift more to the aggressive skew, fundamentally the deck has to change. You start to cut cards like Shark Typhoon. You start to cut, some of the greedier stuff like Neutralize that is in there to beat the controlling decks, and you're able to play, cards that have better matchups against the aggressive cards like Dream Trawler. You're able to play, Talsimare, Friend of Wolves. So we're certainly skewed right now to beat the controlling matchups. So we have, 4 Omen of the Sea, which you have to play in Yorion decks. The reason being that this card is so amazing. It comes onto the board, it sticks around, and then once you play your Yorion, it's just a free scry 2 draw card. So Omen of the Sea, super, super great. You play them early, and then, they power up your late game Yorion. Yorion, of course, also resets Planeswalkers, so you notice we have a ton of Planeswalkers in the deck. So Yorion comes down, it is able to, say you have a Narset on 1 or a Teferi on 1 or something, you're able to reset your Planeswalker. So it's super good in that capacity. Tamayo, actually, the primary use is we are playing 80 cards, and although 80 is a big number, relative to what decks have traditionally been, the key of Yuria or Tamayo is it finds, the important cards. Because even though we're playing 80 cards in a given matchup, there's actually very few cards that matter. So in the videos that follow, you're going to see me saying I need to hit land drops, I need to find Elspeth Conquers Death, I need to find Teferi. Those are primarily the cards I'm looking to find. And so Tamayo helps me find Elspeth Conquers Death and recur it in the controlling matchups, which is really the most important part. Ether Gust is super, super good against the aggressive red decks, and it's also good against, it's great in this mirror. Not certainly the best card, but you'll see I actually, played aggressively against, green-based control decks because it does have some value in those matchups. So, this is kind of the core of the deck. I've had people ask me about sideboarding. Sideboarding is obviously different based on, the matchups of the particular cards. The sideboard right now looks like this. This obviously can change based on, what the metagame looks like. The 3 Knight of Autumns, they're good against, decks that are playing fires. They're good against decks that are playing Witch's Oven primarily. This card is really in there for the aggressive decks. The reason being that it kills Witch's Oven, it gains its life, and Yorion can bounce it, which makes it, I think, a little better than something like Grafdigger's Cage, because also they can just, get rid of Grafdigger's Cage. So I think Knight of Autumn is probably, the card to gain us life, present a threat, and it gets rid of, Witch's Oven. Alternatively, it also has applications in the Fires mirrors or these controlling mirrors with Elspeth Conquers Death, because Elspeth Conquers Death is really the most important card in these controlling mirrors. So a lot of the time what happens is I'll slam an Elspeth Conquers Death, and then my opponent will slam an Elspeth Conquers Death to remove my Elspeth Conquers Death. And if you have these Knight of Autumns, instead of having to answer your opponent's Elspeth Death with your own Elspeth Conquers Death, you actually just have a Knight of Autumn that can take it out and prevent the saga from ticking up. So that's super, super, super important. For Mystical Dispute, for the controlling matchups, for any blue-based decks, obviously this is one of the premier counterspells, not only in Standard, but in, pretty much any format where blue is played, so every format in Magic, except kind of Vintage. This is a bad rate in Vintage, but I've seen it see a little play. Dovin's Veto, this card just says no to anything. And in a format where so many people have Mystical Disputes, Dovin's Veto gains a lot of value. The reason being is, say my opponent plays Fires of Invention on 4 mana and they have a blue up. Well, if I was to Ether Gust or Mystical Dispute that, well, they can just tap 1 more mana, play Mystical Dispute, and counter my, spell and land their Fires. But, oh no, we have sideboarded out of Dovin's Veto, haven't we? But without, with Dovin's Veto, it just says no. Ether Gust, this is good against green, red-based decks, primarily red-based aggro, green-based ramp. Decks where they're playing either, mono red, or they're playing, red-black, where they have a lot of steal your card effects, or, maybe they're, playing Kroxa. It's good, anytime you're seeing red or green. It puts Nisa's back if Nisa starts to become a little more prevalent in the metagame. It deals with Uro pretty nicely. So Ether Gust, super, super good. And then Devout Decree is really our concession for the red-black decks. And, the black-based aggressive decks playing Luris. So in mono red, the thing is, this deck is certainly like 50-50 with the controlling or the aggressive decks, and it's like 80-20, 90-10. I'd even go so far to say against the Fires decks, the more, controlling deck. So the thing is, in against Luris, as good as Elspeth Conquers Death is against, the other decks in the format, the Luris decks only have 1 creature that costs 3, or more converted mana cost. So, against some Luris decks, we can actually board out like a lot of the top heavy stuff. Like, what is Elspeth Conquers Death really doing in that matchup? What is Narset doing in that matchup? It comes into the board, it finds you a spell, and it dies. What is Neutralize doing? Is it worth spending 3 mana to counter one of their 1 mana, threats? So a lot of these cards come out, and we can board in 8 against them. So we board in 8. Maybe we cut our Elspeth Conquers Death. Maybe we cut some number of Tamayo, some number of Neutralize, some number of Narset. And then the reason we keep in Shark Typhoon is it does create a blocker. And then some situations in the late game, they, unlike a lot of the controlling matchups, they don't have access to just be able to kill an enchantment. So sometimes you land Shark Typhoon, and then you can, play 2 or 3, heavy costed cards and make, a 3/3, a 4/4, a 5/5 as a blocker. It also just cycles to make a blocker, which is nice. So Shark Typhoon, I actually like to keep in because sometimes it's just a 3 mana 1/1. You cycle it for 3 mana, you get a 1/1, and that's able to block, chump block, or destroy one to trade with one of their 1/1s. So we keep in the Shark Typhoons, but we're boarding in 7 cards, and then the corollary to that is against the controlling decks, we have 6 cards, sometimes 7, sometimes 8 or 9. I'm not bringing in all 3 Knight of Autumns usually against the Elspeth Conquers Death decks. Depending on how many creatures they have, like fires, we might want to keep in some amount of Shadow the Sky. So, we board out Shadow the Sky. Say they have, say it's fires, maybe we board out 2 copies. There is a fires deck, though, that ran 4 Inspired Ultimatum instead of Cavalier Flame. So against them, maybe I'm boarding out all 4 copies, but I want more Ether, I want the Ether Gust, more. Whereas against some fires decks, maybe they're not playing, a ton of red stuff outside of the fires. So it really, Gabriel Nasis deck, the only red card really is, Fires of Invention. So maybe Ether Gust isn't necessarily good there. So a lot of sideboarding in this format is contextual. You really need to pay a lot of attention because of how good mana is to what color mana your opponents have access to, what they can do, and then sideboard from there. But in general, as a general sideboarding guide, you're taking out your, heavy costed stuff. A good thing to think about is what does this card do? How good is Tamayo against, an aggressive opponent? It comes down. It doesn't really impact the board, though. They can, untap and attack it and kill it, or they can sometimes just ignore it. So how good is Tamayo? How good is Narset? It comes down, it finds a card, and then it dies, or it doesn't affect the board. Alternatively, how good is Teferi? Well, Teferi comes down, it can bounce a creature, draw us a card, then maybe it absorbs some damage. So that's, a pretty good card. So you have to think contextually about what does it do? How good is Ether Gust here? Well, how many red permanents does my opponent have in their deck? How many green permanents? So you really need to think about, in this format with how good the mana is, with how good the cards are, and how aggressively costed everything is. You have to think, how am I going to board? How am I going to build my deck? And in an 80 card deck, there's certainly a lot of room to go. So this right now for this week, I think is the best version of Bant Yorion. Next week, that might be different. But for now, I think this is, as long as Fires, as long as Timor Reclamation are kind of the premier decks in the format, I certainly think this is a good place to be. So anyways, guys, hope you stick around, watch the 5 matches I played last night. Watch me go 5-0, 10-0, see how the deck works a little bit, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until next time.